Hi, everyone, and welcome to the second episode of Seal of Approval. So joining me tonight, of course, is the co-host, Scrump. How are you today? Scrump?
There we go. yeah. Sorry, I was just doing like a clutch thing with my mic there. I fixed it. I yanked up my cable. I was like, oh no. I'm doing good. Apart from nearly fumbling my microphone there. I'm doing fine. Just hunkered down like most people are here in the UK. Watching the craziness unfold, but there's not really been anything near me in my local area because I live out here in the semi countryside. So it's quite pleasant here, really. Quite nice.
Right.
Also joining me tonight is two people who have appeared on my streams the most. Blaire, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. I'm just getting back from vacation. I had to sort of evacuate LA because things were literally on fire and things were just really crazy. But now I'm home and things seem to have calmed down. So I'm just getting back in the swing of like YouTube and being in the city, etc.
And also tonight is...
So you're saying you had to escape from LA?
Yeah, literally. Like the movie, bitch. Yeah.
Also, there's Mark.
Oh, thanks for the introduction, Rose. Appreciate the lengthy... you forgot all my honorifics.
Mark is also here.
His lordship, ruler of all things. I apologize to everyone who can see that I look a bit like a pale vampire today. I have been going out and getting the sun, but unfortunately, if I open those curtains back there, then you don't get to see my face at all because the color balance is all off. So unfortunately, you're stuck with white out Mark for this evening, but thank you.
I just had to turn off my camera for a little bit because this room is an oven, and right now I just feel and look really, really gross. But
usually I'm the only one not on camera, so it's nice today to be on camera.
Yeah, because like normally, you're not like done up or anything for the...
Oh, no, I'll be honest. Usually when I'm doing your live streams, I'm laying in bed with the laptop like on my chest, right up in my face, and I'm just like looking crazy, hoping the camera accidentally turn on and ruin my career.
That's right. I remember last time you were complaining that you managed to burn yourself with some straighteners.
Burn myself with what?
Straighteners.
Was it straighteners? You burned yourself like straighteners or curling irons or something?
Yeah, last time I had a huge burn on my neck from a straightener, and Joey thought it was a hickey, but we moved past that.
Happens to me all the time. I don't know what. Yeah, just lockdown hair. Am I right, ladies?
So, there's been a hell of a lot going on over the last week, but I think the first thing that we should probably talk about, because Blaire's only with us for an hour, and so I thought this would be kind of a good point to jump off from, is J.K. Rowling. Now, I'm assuming that a lot of people who are watching this are aware of the awful thing which she did, which was that she commented about it is biological women who have periods, and that is just peak transphobia. And since then, we've had a really kind of weird meltdown with both sides kind of screeching at each other. Like, I don't know whether anyone else has noticed this, but all the people who are criticizing J.K. Rowling are kind of calling her like a TERF, massive transphobe and all of that. And then Daniel Radcliffe came out and disagreed with Rowling. And then all of a sudden, he was getting labeled like a misogynist and he hates women. Like, did anyone else see that?
I did.
I saw all of that, yes.
I mean, I don't know how...
What I saw...
I just want to say I don't know how people can accuse Daniel Radcliffe of hating women more than he clearly hated himself by taking that role in Equus.
Which one's Equus?
That was the stage play he did to distance himself from.
Oh God, that was the one with the horse.
The one where he got naked.
Yeah, the one where he got naked. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh God, that was awful.
God. Now, what I noticed is there's a lot of people flying off the handle on both sides. It seems. Really, it reminds me really of what happened during the UK election with Labour and the whole like trans rights charter that a lot of people signed that called Women's Place UK a hate group. It's very much the left and the woke crowd eating itself between the traditional feminists and the identity politics trans activists. They're very much, they really, really hate each other despite agreeing on practically almost everything politically. Yeah. It's really funny. They have this very minor point of disagreement and they're willing to kill each other over it.
Yeah. Like I mean, if you actually look at a lot of the kind of the radfem side and the trans activist side, they actually have a lot of middle ground. Like they both are mostly on the left, although they accuse each other of being on the right, because to them being on the right is evil. A lot of them generally go along with things like the progressive stack. Where their real disagreement lies is purely on relation to trans people and whether someone can transition to be a woman or not. That is basically their one kind of crutch.
Yeah, I mean,
well, what was your take on? Oh, sorry, I was just going to ask what your take was there, Blaire.
I was just going to say, like, I feel like despite all the craziness and every side attacking each other viciously, the only thing I could even think to do was like, okay, I'm going to ignore all the noise. I'm going to look at these tweets as a trans woman and ask myself if I'm personally offended by them, if I personally think that they're uncalled for or out of line or whatever. And I couldn't find one thing wrong. The closest thing I could find wrong was her asserting, you know, the women having a period thing, because technically, of course, trans men have their periods, but I just can't wrap my head around feeling like her statements meant that she must hate trans people.
Yeah.
Because not ignore the fact that that's what transphobia is. I feel like the word gets so broadened, but transphobia is hating trans people. And everything you can see, even if maybe she needs to be educated about certain things, that's fair. That's a fair assessment, clearly. But hate trans people, I couldn't feel that. I couldn't see that. And it was interesting that I wrote an article for the Post Millennial basically saying that I didn't personally find it transphobic at all. And in fact, I found it a bit more transphobic, the assertion that biological sex isn't real, because that kind of invalidates my entire journey as a trans woman.
Yeah,
that's the biggest thing that I've noticed, certainly, is that it's the same thing with it's a similar thing which happened in the gay community when it comes to gender identity in general, because the greatest argument that especially the gay community had in advancing, say, marriage rights and defending against things like conversion therapy was that their sexuality was an inherent characteristic. And it's, you know, if you take those things away from people, and similarly in this thing, everybody seems to jump from the idea, like someone has a disagreement with someone else and it immediately jumps to hate without getting through, you know, it's not even, oh, we've got this disagreement, then there's dislike, then there's loathing, then there's hatred, right? There's a degree to which these things, so even if, you know, J.K. Rowling could not be considered, shall we call it, an ally to the trans cause, whatever that happens to be defined as today or tomorrow, you know, to call something hateful is just, you know, it's not like she's going out and she's like, so I've written this manifesto about how much I hate trans people, and also here's a video of me corralling a few of them and shooting them for sport, right? It's not the same thing.
I'm confused about what exactly the trans cause even is, because if anyone decides to look at the actual thread, like the replies and just the conversation happening underneath all of her tweets, it seems to me that there's not really a consensus among trans people. It seems like half of them are sort of the type that will more so agree with me, and then the other half don't, of course. But if we can't even grab hold of a consensus of how we move forward as a community and what our cause is, then how the hell are we going to expect J.K. Rowling or other people to? So I don't like how
the problem is that I find is that both sides say the phrase trans women are women, but they mean slightly different things by it.
Yes.
I don't think J.K. Rowling or anyone really who's woke in the way that she is would genuinely invalidate people's identity and say that they are men. The argument seems to be over the existence of biological sex, which a lot of people have missed. I think what Daniel Radcliffe said, I don't think she needed condemning. That was weird and odd to see basically Harry Potter fight his creator.
she gave him a career.
Really meta shit.
She gave him a career.
What are you saying there, Blaire? Yeah, she did, basically, yeah.
She's the reason there is probably hundreds of millions of dollars sitting in his bank account. And maybe disloyalty is like the biggest like character flaw that I hate in life. So I was just like triggered, for lack of a better word, by even seeing that. I was like, that's really cool.
I don't think Daniel Radcliffe, in what he said anything particularly, apart from condemning her for no reason, said anything particularly controversial either. It seems both sides are attacking each other over basically nothing. I don't see
they make each other sound a lot worse than they actually are. And this is one of the reasons why the current like trans narrative is so toxic. I mean, going back to like accusations of transphobia, I've seen a few people try and describe transphobia as being you are against trans rights. To be against trans rights is to be transphobic. But like Blaire said, there is not a consensus on what constitutes trans rights.
Right, and that's a thing as well. It's the newness, really, of this entire conversation. It's in many cases, it's the blind leading the blind. You have a huge quantity of people who are what economists would call very low information, and the narrative is being redefined, it seems, sort of year on year. I don't think it's necessarily week by week, but certainly you can see that there are these distinct strata of different perspectives over, say, the last decade. And so the reason these voices are being amplified is because, say, J.K. Rowling, who right at the beginning was considered to be like the voice of the woke left, and so it was natural that she would clearly get on board with this new development of as the trans message has come out. But in reality, the message from people claiming to speak from the trans community has been deeply hypocritical at times. It has been deeply controversial, and they argue with and the arguments within the own community itself mean that there is no clear narrative anyway. So there's so much division.
I'll put it like this. I wrote my article, sort of in defense of J.K. Rowling, but more just invested in the actual conversation. And what I saw in the response, as far as I always judge my Instagram DMs off of like the true response of things, because people have to be really dedicated to go to Instagram and then message you about something and do somewhere else. So I saw a lot of trans people who agreed with me, and even more white liberals who are not trans, who thought that what I said was transphobic, who thought she was transphobic, and were trying to tell me how I should feel as a trans woman. So
people with a savior complex.
That is,
I don't think. Yeah, that's my take. I don't think either group did anything wrong. That's the thing. It's just like neither of you have particularly controversial beliefs. I mean, I disagree with the whole biological sex doesn't real thing, but I don't think people are evil who think, and I think that they have flawed logic. But a lot of the terminology is so gray. It's funny as well with J.K. Rowling, because she was like the darling of the left for a little while when she was redefining all her characters as black and gay.
Yeah,
and then it became a bit of a
Snape fondled Slytherin's balls.
Yes, he was. Yeah, Hagrid was into felching. We all know this. It's kind of. Harry Potter was actually a midget throughout the whole thing. It's just if you read between the lines really carefully, it's all there. He's a gay black midget in a wheelchair. It's so obvious. But no, it's J.K. Rowling used to be like the woke darling for this short period of time, and now you see them turning in on her. And I think a lot of the people who are attacking her, they will turn in on them for something else they believe. And this whole thing, for me, has been this amazing demonstration of how the left eats itself. Yeah. And how the purity spiraling keeps going down and down and down and down. So the woke heroes of yesteryear are the right-wing villains of this year. I've been taking chat as well, talking about how they're all accusing each other of being right-wing. Yes. Misogynist.
Taking the political spectrum out of it, I think it's a case that progressives in particular seem to fail to understand this concept that there are no solutions, there are only trade-offs, there are only compromises. So you get the best compromise that you can. Human beings are inherently flawed in many different ways, both in their thinking and like a man without a vice does not exist, right? This is something that we know, and so no one will ever meet your expectations. We have statements like never meet your heroes, because they never match up to your expectations. It's why archetypes exist and this sort of thing. But the progressives, and in particular the white liberal types, just seem incapable of I suppose coexisting with this.
Yeah.
And I just want to say, like,
Blaire, a quick question for you there, Blaire. I know you get a lot of blowback. You get a lot of people hating you for a lot of different things. And I did read your article on the Post Millennial. How, on a scale of like 1 to 10, how bad would you say like the backlash was for what you wrote? Was there a lot of hate around, or was it quite mild?
It's hard to judge. I mean, my articles don't get nearly as many clicks as like my videos and stuff. I would say it's the same as always. It's like, I speak on trans issues for a living. Most trans people agree with me, of course, not all. And then like and the reaction is always just from people who aren't trans trying to convince me, what it's just the same as we see like, some, Black people and people of color speaking out against recent events. And then you have a bunch of white knight Captain Save-A-Ho liberals telling them how they should feel as minorities. It's always the same thing. And I always feel like I'm fighting against them. Not even like, I don't even have time to address like actual like bigotry toward trans people because I'm always busy addressing like these people. You know what I mean? And I also just want to say like, I think there is room for a nuanced discussion about how some people's idea of the trans cause, as we keep saying, does contradict some of what we've been raised to believe and raised to fight for in terms of women's rights. Does it mean trans people are taking away women's rights? No, I think people who dip into that territory are becoming a bit extreme with it.
Yeah.
But there's a nuanced conversation about how there is a push and pull between those two things. And I just hate how no one can really have it without being accused of being a TERF. And again, some of them really do go too far. Or being transphobic. It just becomes a cluster F.
Yeah, and it doesn't help when you go into the arguments about biological sex. I mean, it should go as granted that the majority of trans people would believe in biological sex. Otherwise, why would we be transitioning? But this isn't always a narrative that comes out of the community. And this is when you really start to get the problems. This is how you end up getting the likes of, say, I use someone like Alex Drummond as an example. And the reason for that, for those who don't know, Alex Drummond is a trans activist in the UK who hasn't medically transitioned, but has a full-grown beard and is a spokesperson for Stonewall and will go into schools and talk about trans issues.
Oh,
but this is someone who is not making any kind of effort to transition whatsoever. Like, this person does not look like a woman. And so when you're having this argument, when they kind of bring in the biological angle to this, a lot of the argument will be, well, this is a woman because she says that she's a woman, even though you can tell clearly that she isn't. But they seem to kind of conflate the biology just with the gender identity. This is when you hear people make arguments about this is a woman's body.
Well, that goes back to like, I think one thing that people like Rose and Dawn and myself have to sort of come to grips with is that like the idea of what being trans is for a lot of people is completely different. I remember at the beginning of my transition, I would go to a support group for trans people. And pretty quickly, the conversation turned into the concept or the idea that the concept of transition was in itself transphobic because you shouldn't have to change anything to be perceived a certain way.
Yeah.
And
despite the fact that gender identity as a concept is predicated almost entirely on what you present.
Yes.
Yeah. It's not even, it's about secondary sex characteristics, how you're perceived. That's how pronouns work as well.
Yeah.
So, being trans to Rose and I is completely different than to, a lot of people, unfortunately, which is why I definitely try to get in the habit of saying transsexual rather than transgender, because I think that is more specific, but that's an ugly word, if I'm going to be honest. I don't like calling myself
I kind of cringed. Like I did have a habit years ago. I would always make sure you call me a transsexual because I am. And then when I hear other people say it, or when I hear other trans women making the point of saying I am a transsexual woman, it always makes me cringe a little bit inside. It just sounds so weird to say as a sentence, even though they are technically correct.
Well, it sounds to me in much the same way as it, certainly for people in my position, where I feel it's, when I hear someone who uses what is in effect what I would consider to be a relatively arbitrary characteristic. It's an inherent part of your person, but it's not something that you can influence, right?
Yeah.
So in the same way, it's like I'd much rather that you address me as by your name. It's like I wouldn't say that I am cissexual Mark. It just doesn't work that way.
Weird.
I would just introduce myself as Mark, and in the same way, if you are presenting as a woman and you are meaning in the gender construct, presenting as female, presenting as a woman, in a social context, then just call yourself, what that is. There's no need to tack
it. Really is.
Stuff, right?
It's a case of walks like a duck, quacks like a duck.
Yeah.
And
I think
you're gonna call it a duck.
Yeah, and I think it is the open border policy, which I think has caused a lot of this mess. Because when you're getting these kind of wild-looking activists, and again, just to make sure I'm not because I'm always misunderstood by the more kind of radical trans activists when I make this point. So I want to be clear. When I'm criticizing the kind of the appearance of the likes of Alex Drummond, Danielle Moscato, so on and so forth, it isn't me making fun of their appearance. What I'm doing is these are ultimately ludicrous attempts to try and pass yourself off as a woman because there is no effort there.
Get more radical, Rose. No, hashtag gas the non-passers. No.
But but I want to kind of make that clear because a lot of the time when I try and bring that up, I'll then be kind of attacked on my own appearance. And that isn't what I'm doing. Ultimately, if you want my respect as a trans woman, you need to make some sort of effort. You have to earn the pronouns. When you have the likes of Danielle Moscato, who made up lots of excuses as to why not to transition, I think eventually came out with, it's a medical reason why I can't do it. But initially, at the start of his transition, it was because he wanted to spend too much time fighting for Black Lives Matter. Like that was his original excuse before all else. He was living on someone's couch and pushed, I'm a Black Lives Matter activist. So
it's important to note that there are, and this is something I've sort of recently started really realizing and sort of educating myself on, which is there are multiple reasons why people take the trans label. And I've always known about people who genuinely feel that that's the course of action to maximize their happiness and success. That's my personal reason for being trans and calling myself trans. And then there's also attention and there's also fetishism.
Yeah.
So, there's different motives going into people who call themselves transgender and transsexual. Yeah. So it really complicates things.
No, I do agree. But this is the kind of thing which needs to be bottomed out before really any further discussion can have. When we're talking about a trans person, are we literally just having it as anyone who says they are? Because that's the current mantra.
But then when you try to, sort of set up barriers like, hey, I'm not the same as someone who's doing this for sexual kicks or whatever, and it becomes then you're gatekeeping and you're bigot and you're transphobic and
it's such a strange. It's such a strange and controversial interaction as well, because it is a negotiation between the members of society and yourself. So
yes,
you're presenting one image and you're saying, I am a woman, and some if in some cases if you're not perceived as putting in the effort or you're not passing or whatever, then some parts of society are going, try harder.
Yeah,
it's like a lot of them are just saying, "No, you're not."
And how do you get around? How do you get around that in general? Because again, it's like discussing. There's a lot of stuff in the psychological community at the moment around beauty standards, because it's easy to influence the media and the like, and what is fat beautiful and that sort of thing. And again, it's not something which can be coerced and controlled, and so I think it's always going to be considered a problematic topic. It's always going to be something of discussion. Sorry, Blaire, go on.
I was just gonna say, contrary to popular belief, I actually don't give a fuck about passing in terms of I don't judge people by passability or passing or whatever. It's just just to cut the shit. It's just about when someone's trans and when they're not. I've met so many trans women and trans men who frankly don't pass at all, but it's very clear from their energy and their effort or the way they present and whatever that they are trans. And I have met trans women who everywhere they go, they're going to be called, she and her by strangers, not because they necessarily look like one, but because society in general will recognize that they're trying, you know what I mean? And in turn we'll call them that. That's just facts. And I guess it's just hard to sometimes remember that like the online discourse when it comes to all this is actually a bit different than real life. Like I don't know. Like
no, I see exactly what you're saying.
That's always been my point. It's all about putting, as long as you're putting in some sort of effort, that society is going to read you. Because I've always thought of it as almost like a social contract. Like, as a trans woman, you're born biologically male, so you're already kind of at a disadvantage for people to refer to you in the way you'd like to be seen. So you make an effort to try and kind of meet that definition of what a woman is, so society the way you want to be seen. Now, the problem with the kind of the open border policy is that it kind of negates all of that, and then it becomes, well, you have to refer to me in this way, otherwise you're a bigot. And this is the biggest complaint about
the biggest advantage people have in terms of being civil is that if you make someone want to call you the right thing, I think that's a lot more conducive to the idea that you should force people to call you the right thing.
I think
some people will automatically just go against that and rebel and say, well, you know, just because you're trying to force me to say it, I'm just not going to say it to be awkward. Sometimes to a ludicrous degree, but I think the idea is if you make people want to address you by how you want to be addressed, if you're pleasant to them, that has much better results than being antagonistic. And we see that constantly.
It's why, again, mentioning that it being a social interaction, it's a lot about respect.
Yes. Oh, it has to be. Otherwise, people aren't going to refer to you in the way that you want. But it's always
people are generally like polite. Like I don't know. I mean,
outside of the internet, certainly, you know.
Yeah. People in real life don't just walk around misgendering people or whatever. Like I know sometimes things will be different. Like in school, maybe your whole school knows and they make fun of you, whatever. That's different. But in terms of like being an adult in this world, we're talking mostly about being an adult here. Most people don't really give a fuck what you are or how you present. They just go based off what they see. And if you're not making the bare minimum threshold for people like calling you that, what you want to be called, even when it's not even that high, it's actually very low. Like I remember in my early transition, even before my transition, people were calling me she, and I looked nothing like a she in the beginning, like nothing. And people did just because of my energy. So it's like, I don't really know what to tell people who are so like upset by all that.
One thing that I do kind of want to talk about in Rowling's massive essay, it's just one point, because I kind of want to know your guys' feelings on this, because I see this argument a lot from the kind of gender critical side, and it probably would have helped to have had a trans guy here. When in this part here, when she's talking about the acronym of TERF and saying that they're not trans exclusionary, she says radical feminists aren't even trans exclusionary. They include trans men in their feminism because they were born women. Now, I've always kind of took that as like, if I was a trans guy, I'd probably be a little bit insulted by that, because is it not that a trans guy wants to be seen as a man? And then you have the kind of the radfem side saying, well, you know, we accept you, but as one of our sisters. So, you know, we're really tolerant of this.
Here's my problem, first of all, with that. I hear that a lot, and I've been studying a lot with the second wavers and the TERFs and a lot of the older generation of feminists who they have this idea that having a vagina makes you a magical, special being and imbues you with special rights and powers just by virtue of being a like magical vagina owner. And there's this really weird constant thread. It's been throughout, like, I guess the second wave in the 70s and all of this about the fact that women have these inherent rights and inherent powers and are inherently special. And they think of that as a biological imperative. So they see themselves as born special because they're women, which I think is one of the more toxic ideas about feminism, that they essentially are like female supremacists. They believe they're better, and they believe that they have extra rights because they're women. The way I've always explained it is TERFs are like, they're the same as normal feminists, except they extend their man-hating to trans women because they believe they're still men. That's really the only difference there. And I think my take on that is, if I was a trans man, I'd be kind of insulted by that, because like, no, I'm not a woman. I don't ascribe to feminism because I don't see myself as a woman. And the fact that I guess they're going the same route as a lot of conservatives do is that they're being, you know, yes, biology exists. Yes, biological sex exists, but they're being kind of biological absolutists and saying, if you're born a woman, you have these inherent rights, and we all have to fight for each other, and we're all like magical vagina beings, which I've always found extremely disconcerting about second wave feminism.
I've just seen Mars in the comments. So he says, the way I perceive, let me see if I can show it. Yeah, the way I perceived that is due to the fact that we are vulnerable as trans men, which is true. Okay, so like just so I'm clear, Mars, that's okay. Right, okay. So Mars, can you just clarify in the comments? Are you offended by that message that J.K. Rowling put, or are you not? I just want to kind of understand where you're coming from, if he's still watching, or maybe.
I mean,
maybe he's not. I don't know. Anyway, so yeah. Pardon?
Oh, shall we round this up and
yeah, I kind of
I think to put a button on it, this is a conversation that is still evolving. It's relatively new. I don't think it's safe to write off people as transphobic because of nuanced views about certain things. As a trans woman, I know what real transphobia looks like. I did not personally feel that upon analyzing all her stuff. People were free to disagree, and that's why it's a conversation that's still evolving.
Okay, so Mars says, I wasn't offended because I knew what she meant. It's like when I mention us about the prison argument. They ignore us. We're vulnerable in similar ways because of biological sex. Right.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thanks for clearing that up. Okay, so I want to move away from the J.K. Rowling stuff because like the last thing I want to say on it is, did anyone notice that as soon as Daniel Radcliffe kind of came out and condemned J.K. Rowling, the hashtag Daniel Radcliffe had a little picture beside it?
Did it?
Yeah. They had a little crown on. Yes, King Slay.
Yeah. Like I found that a little bit interesting. Because it is effectively Twitter kind of endorsing one particular view.
Yeah, it's more
Twitter endorsing a particular view? Surely not.
Yeah. So let's move on from that then and kind of talk about the rest of the culture war that's been absolutely raging over the last week, because honestly, this is fascinating.
J.K. Rowling's been cancelled, but they're trying to cancel the entirety of the police worldwide.
Yes. Right, and let me
abolish police now.
I've got so many links open. Sorry, I know this is kind of a little bit sloppy right now. Here.
No, you see, I say abolish police, but when I say abolish police, what I really mean is words. It's just paragraphs.
When we say defund the police, we don't actually mean defund the police. We mean, well, we don't know what we mean. There was that interview on CNN with that woman saying about how, she's kind of concerned about them kind of abolishing the police. And the other one just said something along the lines of, oh, yeah, well, that's just our privilege. But they never actually, they never answered the question, what are they going to do in place?
Well, what to call the police is white privilege.
Well, there's been stuff going around on Twitter. I really wish I had, I think I've got it saved here. Bear with me just for 2 seconds. But basically, they were laying out a series of alternative. Yeah, here we are. As some folks are sleeping on benches in the park. Imagine a city employee comes by and checks to see if they need a place to sleep, food, water, or healthcare. An hour later, those who want a different place to sleep have one. Isn't that public safety?
No.
So
that's never going to happen.
So they've got all these things. There's some fun, really bizarre ones here. So it's like, you don't realize, but your brake lights aren't working. Imagine a city employee signals for you to pull over and says, hey, how about I replace those lights for you right here so no one gets hurt? An hour later, both lights work and you're at home. Isn't that public safety?
Right. A lot of this I don't know whether anyone has seen it. There's an episode of The Simpsons where Homer runs for the trash, garbage man thing. And he comes out with loads of wacky promises on what the garbage man will be able to do. They'll come and clean your suit. They'll change your baby's diaper and all of this. And it basically just reads like that.
Yeah, here's the worst and most interesting one, right? Because of course you know that they want to de-escalate things. That these are the same people who want to, de-arm America, right? As
Yes.
well. So incidents of gun violence are rising in the neighborhood. Imagine.
Oh God, I covered this one. This was amazing.
A trauma-informed crisis intervention team works with community activists to disarm and de-escalate conflicts. People doing harm are connected to services that address this underlying problem. Isn't that public safety?
I did a whole thread debunking these because there were so many of them that were so weird. Yeah, my version was it said, yeah. How's that going, Blaire?
I would say, I think one of the problems the left has is their fear to not capitulate to the radical elements of their party. So in a sane world, we'd have these protests against police brutality, which I personally believe in. I mean, in America, that is a genuine issue that we have. And in a more ideal world, we would be talking about reforming the police. I think there's a nuanced discussion happening right now about that, which I think is actually very important. I have very mixed feelings about police officers in general. I'll get more into that. But, the second someone in the crowd of sane people yells something like defund the police or abolish the police, suddenly everyone's too scared to not capitulate to the extreme version of what they're already arguing. Not to say there's not radical elements on the right, of course, but I think we do a bit of a better job of containing those and being like, okay, chill over there, the grown-ups are talking. Whereas on the left, there's no, okay, the grown-ups are talking type of a vibe ever.
Well,
one of the things that I brought up on Monday, which is my regular show, they just shameless plug there. Is that when it comes to the police, I fear that certainly reforming the police is the right decision for many reasons, especially in the US. There seems to be, in particular, I mean, even if we ignore everything to do with Derek Chauvin and this and the Black Lives Matter movement, and whether or not this case against him about George Floyd holds water in any particular context, this is his 18th offense for abuse of power.
Right.
And that is a damning indictment of the ability of that police force to hold its officers to account.
Yes.
And that is certainly something which needs to be addressed. Having roving vigilante groups who call themselves crisis intervention teams, I don't think is the solution.
Yeah.
It's not going to do it. And a lot of those people
needs to be. I don't think, because it is not a black and white issue, as unfortunately no issue ever is. You cannot just simply say that the police are completely blameless in this, especially considering the history that the US has with certain things that have been enforced. So that's what that.
100%. And it's just such an interesting year for me. In terms of viewing all this stuff. 2020 is obviously a crazy year. It's because, for months we saw examples of police overreach. We saw people getting arrested in parks. We saw police busting into people's homes because they heard there was a party going on, and COVID. And I personally had a police officer approach me here in LA and threaten me with $1,000 fine if I was not wearing a mask. He was not wearing a mask. So months after seeing that, and then expecting me to jump on this train of all cops are amazing and all that stuff, I'm not going to do that. I think my perspective is, let's reform the police. I had an idea. I was kind of drunk the other night and just talking about this with my friend, and I was like, why are there not necessarily term limits, or the equivalent of term limit for police officers in the US? Because what I hear is that, a lot of people go into the police force with every good intention in the world. They want to be heroes. And when you're subjected to the bottom of the barrel of society every single day for decades, it can corrupt you into what we call a bad cop. So I almost wonder if this is a career that, once you serve your the limit of what we all kind of agree is the maximum, then maybe that should be it for you.
Well, it makes sense. But the amount of people I personally know who have become police officers in the UK, they barely last more than about 3 or 4 years tops, because the job itself is so emotionally demanding. You've got to be on it.
There are various things which are proposed to solve this. One of which is rotational policing. So in the same way, this is something which has been introduced. I mean, it's been around since the Romans, right? So you can't have certain communities policing other communities because they're too emotionally involved. You get massive burnout in communities where there is a high level of violence and the police get radicalized. And then there's also the problems that come with that, which is that people don't know their local police officers, and that the local police officers don't know the local business owners, the local residents, and that sort of thing. It's never there's never a one tick solution. It always comes with different problems, but it's one of the things that kind of rotational policing was one of the things which was necessary to kind of drain the swamp, as they say, of UK policing when everything was being centralized. Now, I would argue that UK policing has become too centralized, but I certainly feel like having every single unit completely autonomous was just an open door to corruption in certain areas as well. So it's a very difficult and thorny issue, I have to say.
It depends on the location.
It's just, to me, this is just, in terms of the defund the police, abolish the police. I know people are trying to run that back and pretend like that isn't a talking point. It is. There are people saying abolish the police with hundreds of thousands of likes on Twitter. Okay, so it's a thing. And to me, that's just another example of like, people act like being on the left must mean that you're virtuous and you care about the little guy and you care about minorities and everything, poor people. No, that's like, that to me, abolish the police or defund the police is fighting against your own fucking interests. If we were to do that, what you're going to see is all the rich people of the world are going to have private security. They're fine.
Yeah.
Like, they have the ability to protect themselves. Contrary to popular belief here in Beverly Hills, a lot of these very, woke, anti-gun liberals, they're packing. They're in beautiful mansions in the hills. Of course they're packing, okay?
They have armed security guards as well, and security gates and fences. And
so for them, they have the money to stay safe and not really need the police. For the rest of society who doesn't meet that threshold of wealth, it's going to be the wild, wild west. So how is that in anyone's interest?
Yeah, it resorts to private armies, and then it's just like half the problem that I see with a lot of these protests is a lot of it is capitalism has brought us to this point as well, which is infuriating because by abolishing the police, you invite in all the libertarians who are really interested in their own private armies and McNukes, right?
Bring the McNukes in.
As much as that's a bit of a meme, it becomes very much a reality for especially the poor, who are then subject to things and are largely unaccountable, effectively vigilante group, which is not accountable to anyone.
Well, that's it.
The whole of the
that's kind of what they want. That's kind of what they want. Yeah, the kind of community.
Well, in particular with Black Lives Matter, because I will read this. When they say they want to abolish the police, they really want. This is a thing which they're stepping back there. I feel like it's an extreme position which will be rolled back to reform it into community control, because that is the stated aim on their website. They want to empower residents in communities of color to hire and fire police officers and issue subpoenas, decide disciplinary consequences, and exercise control over city funding of police. And that is just effectively apartheid part 2. It's not it's a direct democracy way of controlling the police, and it's also one of the fastest track ways to have it terribly influenced by people who are up to no good.
I will say, I was having a conversation with my best friend JC, who lived in Cuba for many years and had to literally escape communism. And one of the things that they did there is they have this idea, like there's like snitches in every neighborhood. So there's a designated snitch. And this person goes and say you're during a lockdown, and the snitch goes to the government and says, this person left the house without a mask. This person we think raped this person, whatever. And you're actually giving the government more control, because do you guys think if we get rid of police and local sheriffs and officers and all that, that it's not going to be like actual military that we're now reporting crimes to? Of course it is. So why would you want that?
I mean, one of the things that I've been looking over for the last couple of weeks, a lot on when the communists first took over China, and I've kind of been looking at the way in which they did policing. And in China, they had something known as like Baoju, I think that's how you pronounce it.
Baizao.
Baizao as Baizao. The way in which, like, effectively, the original idea of it was you would, like, the independent families would kind of meet up in a council and report crimes in that way. But eventually, the communists had it changed, so everyone had to effectively dob in people. That was the way in which they started before they kind of got the more.
Well, they took the students and then they made them into. They basically gave them immunity and then made them into the moral police.
That was the Red Guard. That was during the Cultural Revolution. Basically, that was militarized students who were allowed to basically ransack what they would.
That's the problem, though. The problem is that once you empower people like that, they end up being corrupt. Like normal community members who hold a lot of power like that. You think police corruption is bad? Once you start enabling a lot of normal people, you see what happens on Twitter once you give normal people the illusion of a small amount of power. They go nuts. Yeah. They start thinking that they can end people's lives and people's careers, cancel people. That's what it is. It's that small modicum of power. You give them actual power and, they'll be taking protection money from businesses. It's just the same thing. It's like, well, what are the forces that corrupt the police?
Yeah.
The forces are still there. The money is still there. The motivation is still there. The flaws in humanity is still there. What you need is oversight and accountability. And you don't get that with the wishy-washy, community action stuff. It needs to be an institution, and it needs to be relatively centralized in certain ways. There needs to be at least centralized standards for it. It's a matter of degrees. I think a small, targeted change in the police would do a lot of good. You don't need to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And a lot of what's not being talked about with this as well is overreach by agencies like the FBI, overreach by agencies like the ATF, and a lot of the that was talked about before this with the Boogaloo people, with the no-knock raids and people like Duncan Lemp, who there's a lot of controversy between what his family and lawyers and what his girlfriend says and what the police say. His family says he was shot while sleeping, and they shot his girlfriend basically through him. The whole thing was disturbing and terrible. They shot him through a wall, according to his lawyer and his girlfriend's account. And all of that debate isn't being brought into this. We can't have a debate about policing without having a total debate about policing in the US. And I don't think it'll go anywhere. That's the problem. The Black Lives Matter has essentially scuppered the policing debate, possibly for a generation. In a lot of Trump and a lot of the people around him will double down. They'll say law and order. I think this will win them votes because a lot of people are very scared of the mob. They don't want mob rule. The majority of Americans don't want mob rule. So this really, it ends any chance at all of proper police reform. It's terrible.
People forget that this almost exact same scenario played out in the 1920s. As much as I'm loath to mention the rise of Hitler, for instance, this exact same thing pretty much happened in Germany. It also happened to a lesser amount in the UK. Why Mosley and his black shirts and the British Union of Fascists rose up was often in response to, as basically the police weren't doing enough to stem the communist violence, and the vigilantes stepped in. And it's a very dangerous treaded path. It's very difficult. When people don't understand their own history and what caused the rise of such things. And I've completely lost my train of thought, unfortunately. Sorry about
it. No, it's fine. that kind of reminds me a bit about what could potentially be happening over here. Like when we're seeing.
Oh, sorry. Yes, I've got it back. Sorry. It's interesting when you look at things like the massive social media support for something like the taking down of Edward Colston's statue in the UK.
Yeah.
And the calls to do this. Now, according to polls, and we all know that polls aren't trustworthy and they should be taken with a pinch of salt. But according to the polls, 73% of the British public disagree with that action. Not necessarily because they disagree with the message, but because they disagree with the actions. I think it's about 35 on each. But these people who don't know is about 11%, and then there is a small portion, less than 20% of the population, who are just outright fanatical. This is the best thing to do. It's a very a bizarre thing, but I feel like social media in particular really amplifies these particular voices, which
really
aren't
that 20%.
represented. Yes, because again,
I know it's kind of a cliche. Was it the silent majority they refer to? But it really is a case here that most people's opinions aren't reflected on social media.
Most people don't. I don't feel like they really have an opinion. They just want to get on with their lives unmolested.
Yeah, they just want this madness to end. Yeah. Blaire, you said that you've had some negative experience with the police. I guess we can add some balance. So, like, what is your opinion on policing in LA as it stands? Like, how are things there?
Oh, well, I mean, it's just a historical reality about the city of Los Angeles. Like, you have the LA riots. Like, when I evacuated and I posted on Twitter that I was leaving the city, someone was like, you must not be a local because riots are nothing to LA. This is a thing that's been happening for a very long time. And I think it can't be understated that just culturally, there is a distrust of the police among the Black community. I think whether or not that is 100% warranted, we can talk about that, but the case remains that it's there. And so I think people do need to be heard. I'm not one of these people who really throws out these protests as just bullshit. I think that they've been a bit overblown, and I think the rioters that come in, I would love if BLM would more so identify like, hey, that's mostly Antifa, like fuck Antifa, because I think Antifa really hijacked that and really tarnished a lot of credibility of BLM in the general population's eyes.
They did, although I did notice that a lot of people refused to even acknowledge that Antifa were even a factor and blamed it on white supremacists.
Yeah.
They blamed it on white supremacists, KKK, and state actors. They said the police were doing it themselves.
Well, there was the mayor of Minneapolis blamed like kind of foreign intervention, like effectively taking the Russia angle to a whole other level.
I guess I think the last thing I'll say on the policing topic is that here in the UK especially, we've had this lockdown period where the police have been overzealous. I don't know how widespread it was. I've not encountered it personally, so I've been quite careful in limiting my my contacts, just because the people have been crazy out there. I'm not actually that worried about the virus. I'm more worried about the people.
Yes.
But we've had a lot of people. People have been given fines for sitting in their own front gardens. People have been giving fines for things they really shouldn't have done. There's been a lot of overzealous policing on a population that's relatively behaved itself. But now here in the UK, we're having these mass gatherings that are in no way in line with what we've been told, and they're being allowed to happen. The police have gone from over-policing people who are obeying the law to under-policing people who are in no way obeying the law and obeying the lockdown. And my biggest kind of takeaway from the conversation I had with normal people day to day is that that's what's really pissing people off, is the British sense that they have skipped the queue and they are not obeying the rules. And I think that more than anything is delegitimizing the police here. That when people do behave, they crack down on them. But when people don't behave, they suddenly lose their spine. And that has really, really set back the image here.
Yeah,
I think the British police look both overzealous and weak.
We were talking about the American context, though. So, Blaire, can you just continue to elucidate on that?
Yeah, I think that the fight for reform and the battle against police brutality is so valid, especially here. I mean, frankly, like I know there's been a lot of like overreach during the lockdown and stuff in the UK, but like your cops don't even have guns. You know what I mean? Like I think there's like a whole different thing here that, I think a lot of people feel like distrust of the police and they're walking around with guns and it's an extra layer of that. I think that the conversation should involve practical ways in which we can reform the police and practical ways in which we can reduce the amount of police brutality in the country. Unfortunately, I don't see a lot of that. I see a lot of people jumping to abolish the police. I see a lot of people jumping to all police are heroes and we have to defend them against people attacking them. Yeah. And we're getting very tribal rather than practical. So for me, practical ways in which I could see reforming the police and reducing the amount of police brutality are as follows. I thought of you. Deep and extensive psychological testing for people who want to become police officers. Living in Hollywood, I've been through castings for different like reality shows and whatever, which I don't have on my agenda at all. But one of the things, I promise this will make sense in a second. One of the things that they do in castings is they do really deep psychological testing to the point where you're answering 500 question long questionnaires, and they are learning every facet of your personality, what triggers you, what you'll do in certain situations, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Why don't people go through that? That's what
unfortunately, I am a psychologist, and the difficulty with that is that there are a huge variety of standards, and most of them can only account for up to around 20 to 30% accuracy when it comes to this sort of thing. That's the big issue. There are also two sets of tests which are very prevalent. The first is like the Myers-Briggs test, which is not a psychological evaluation but seems to be everywhere, and the second, which is the implicit bias testing, which I worry would kind of creep into that side of things, and that itself has only a 9 to 22% accuracy. So it's very, and it's been used in many harmful ways, which the creators have denounced, but can't really do anything about because it's been commercialized at this point. It's making them a lot of money. That's the difficulty I find with extensive psychological testing, although I certainly think that I just feel like accountability measures, and you know, there's little things like you'd think that it was a simple, like I'm an ex-Air Force, right? So you'd think that it was a simple matter to say things like, what is the UK military's stance on drug abuse in the military? And people, you know, obviously the stance is zero tolerance. That's the general consensus. And still, you'll have people who fail on this question because they are so, you know, into, you know, especially legal officers. We ran into a lot of legal officers who, where it was just like zero tolerance, but you know, everyone does some cocaine on the weekends, right? And my training officer came out and he was shaking his head before my interview. And he was like, I had a guy and he was excellent for the interview, but he just failed on this one question. And I think that just having a consistent standard for hiring practice, you are quite right. I don't know necessarily whether or not psychological testing is the way forward, but the
at least something that's kind of,
but at least something robust.
So you know what people are coming in,
and consistent. And consistent accountability measures are certainly a thing. Where
that's a big thing, yeah.
If the American law system is a 3 strikes and you're out for prisoners, right? When it, you know, you've got that thing where it's life or whatever, in some states, then it should be the same for the police. You know, you cannot have that double standard where it's handled in a house and therefore.
Well, what I've heard really is that the police have the same problem that a lot of public service people have, in that bad apples and bad actors are shuffled round. It's like with teaching. I know in both the UK and the US, bad teachers or even pedophile teachers, where they can't prove claims, instead of firing them, that's such a hard process, they just shuffle them off to a different school district. And it's the same with police. Problem police get shuffled around different police departments.
And there's that a lot to do with...
Yeah, I think it needs to be easier for a police officer to be fired, or at least to be sanctioned.
In the US, there is, I saw an interesting conversation happening about how there's like a social contract in the US in which like we are naturally inclined to trust police officers because we, you know, entrust them with our safety and with power. And so there is something to be said about how it's almost levels of accountability, 100%, because what happens, and we see it over and over and over again in the US is, and I'll put it very generally, cop kills a guy who's unarmed. Cop, like, unless there is protest and unless there is mass outrage, sometimes the cop won't even get charged. And then from there they get charged, but then they have a judge who's sympathetic, and then they have, like, the whole system is set up really to protect cops in these instances. And there is something to be said for that. I mean, cops are in really, really tight situations every single day, but we have to still hold them accountable.
Yeah. Right. So
all the issues. Yeah.
Sorry, because I think because Blaire, I think you said that you're going to be going.
Oh yeah,
interesting. Like Mike has actually just sent me a message on Instagram saying that he's going to be on in a few minutes. So it's kind of like you're kind of tapping out for Mike.
Yeah, He'll replace me. But it was lovely talking to you guys, and I'll talk.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on.
Of course. Bye.
Bye.
Pleasure to meet you, Blaire. Take care.
So, whilst we wait, whilst we wait for Mike to come in, might as well go over some of the super chats that have been sent in. So, Pixel with the £1, thank you. Ramon Kujutika with the $2.
Oh no.
Love seeing the best YouTube streamers, Blaire and Rose. Oh, thank you. Great.
Fuck you. I mean, sorry.
I'm the co-host, goddammit.
Grade A Salt with the $1.99. The word turf has been tainted by gender radicals.
I'd agree.
Yeah, I would say so, because the thing is, it is, as much as they like to say it isn't a slur, it is used a lot like a slur. It's like way when people use cis. Like the term cis is so often used as a slur against cis people. And so that will be the first time anyone ever comes across it. So when you use words in that way, yes, people are going to take it as a slur.
Another problem too is it's become like Nazi in that everyone just gets called a turf.
Mm.
You have one like non-conforming opinion.
Yeah, that's
okay, turf. Yeah,
you disagree with one aspect of what the trans lobby has put out. You don't agree with what Stonewall said last week. You filthy turf. I don't know why I became.
I had an argument.
Well, that's kind of the way some of them sound. Let's be honest.
It's funny. No. So somebody's calling me a turf, and I had to stop them. Like, wait, you think I'm a radical feminist? It's like, no, turf just means anti-trans. It's like, no, it doesn't. It means a specific things. It means trans, exclusionary, radical feminist. Yeah. So you're accusing me of being a radical feminist. Me of being a radical feminist. That's what you're saying. And they're like, no, shut up. No, that's not right. It's like,
the thing is, it's weird when they take that kind of angle and they use turf as like a catch-all insult, but then they try and say, well, it's not a slur. It's a descriptor. But like you said, the descriptor is incredibly specific. You're a radical feminist who excludes. Well, what they really mean is they exclude trans women. They exclude trans women from feminism. That's what it means, right? So you can't call someone like Donald Trump a turf because Trump's not a radical feminist.
Trump the turf.
I mean, I've had a look through things like Turf Blocker and all the kind of people who has put on there. Like Dank is a turf, apparently.
Yeah, it's hilarious. It's become a catch-all for you don't agree with my. Yeah, I know. The Pringles enthusiast himself.
I'm gonna try and get Dank back on.
The Pugman.
Yeah.
Marcus is such a trap enthusiast.
He is. Like,
I don't think
he's not a radical feminist either.
Do you remember when we were Do you remember when we were at that event, like the Dank and Sargon talk, and then you introduced me to Dank as like Queen of the Traps? I think was the expression that you used.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, yes.
I mean, I know stories about Marcus and his experiences with traps that would make people's hair curl.
I think we all have heard of those.
I think we've all heard the story.
There are things that I've heard in a McDonald's bathroom in Bethnal Green at 3 a.m. that dare not need repeating. Yeah.
Right, let's go through some more super chats. Zirindu with the $5 New Zealand dollars. Good morning from the Democratic People's Republic of New Zealand. Our Prime Minister has a massive saviour complex. New Zealand is now called Cindy's Kindy. As in kingdom? Cindy's Kindy Kingdom? I'm confused. That is a good.
I didn't get that one either. I
get that joke. I get that joke. Funny on. Here's the eunuch with the $5. Ethnocentrism is the natural, healthy way to organize a nation. Multiculti globalism has failed. It's time to unify and rebuild. That's the sad truth. Michael Joseph Costa with the $5. Homosexual is going to be banned from UK science literature. I feel this will damage LGBT research. Being changed to same gender attracted. Homosexual is.
They're banning the term homosexual, yes.
Are they?
Why?
What?
Well, they also want to ban the term master and slave from terminology of servers and things like that.
Because that's one of the reasons why they're all spurging out at the moment about STEM.
Yeah. Literally, their concern is terminology.
Yeah, I didn't know they were getting rid of homosexual and changing it to same gender attracted.
This is a 2017 article from Pink News. That's the only thing at Cardiff, but that's the only thing I can find on it in recent times.
There has been calls to eliminate a whole host of words, though. Like you said, the whole what is it? Like STEM strike or whatever's going on right now.
The thing is that sounds realistic. It sounds like a genuinely realistic thing, and there will be people out there who do refer to same gender attracted rather than same sex attracted or homosexual. Like the term same gender attracted is an actual thing, but I haven't seen that. It's one of those things that really wouldn't surprise me if it's happening. So moving on, Patrick with the sorry.
I was just going to say they're also objecting to the term male and female connectors.
Oh, for fuck's sake!
USB ports.
What? Why? What? Why? What do they want to change it to?
Next, you'll be misgendering lions, Scrump.
They don't like the gendered language.
How dare you call penguins male and female?
Excuse me. Did you just assume that penguin's gender?
Yeah.
So get on with the super chats, Rose. Get on with the super chats.
It's going to be cancer. Okay, so Patrick.
Also, there's an image in Twitter that you might want to put up on a screen.
Yeah, send it to me in a DM. I'll put it up. Patrick at the $5. How's everyone handling this color revolution we're living through? We are going to probably touch on the. I don't know why color revolution, but.
Well, there are a lot of people who are throwing around the term race war, and I just feel like it's unwarranted at this point because there's not enough support for it, even amongst the black community. I mean, all you have to do is look at the polling, which shows black approval of Trump is increasing over this because all the
it's more of a localized race slap fight.
Yeah,
I think.
I mean, I'll generally admit, like, it is kind of a bit unnerving, like when you look at the people who are going to, they're going to defend like the Churchill statue and stuff, and then you have the Daily Mail running as, this is, the far right thugs are defending Churchill statue.
That's the Daily Mail, wasn't it? Which is supposed to be a right-leaning outlet, and it's infuriating.
It doesn't read
the
right.
Daily Mail.
Fascists are coming to defend Churchill.
Yes, the fascists who hate Churchill are defending his statue. In the same way, you also have so in my Discord, we've been floating the idea of doing a kind of families day. Take your families up to the monuments, and we'll clean the monuments with like effectively a protective ring of children, and see whether or not they assault children. That's pretty much the thing. But obviously the expectation is they wouldn't hit children. I don't think anyone with any sound judgment would. I expect you'd get a lot of verbal abuse about, how dare you bring your kids here, which is obviously massively hypocritical given the amount of kids we've seen wearing the I am privileged t-shirt or whatever it is, and that sort of thing. I noticed that Mike Harlow's just joined.
Harlow's here.
Hey.
Hi.
Sorry, I'm a minute late. I'm a grandpa. I can't get anything working ever.
That's fine. You kind of like tapped in for Blaire, who had to head off.
Oh, nice.
You guys missed each other by a couple of minutes, but
damn.
But we'll make sure to get you on at the same time.
Totally.
The future.
We'll try to,
So apparently,
Blaire left at like the 1 hour mark, so you did just miss her, I'm afraid.
Apparently, color revolution doesn't refer to this.
Okay.
This sort of thing. Apparently, it's used to describe movements that developed in several countries of the former Soviet Union, China, and Balkans.
What did I miss?
So non-violent resistance, also called civil resistance, demonstration strikes and interventions to protest against governments seen as corrupt or authoritarian. There you go.
Because the British government is incredibly authoritarian. Meanwhile, China.
We talked to we talked about a load of trans rights, Mike, and then also about the BLM protests, and now we're doing super chats.
Yeah, so we've talked. So we talked about so we've talked about J.K. Rowling. We've talked about the dismantling of the police. I mean, except it isn't a dismantling of the police. I'll just do 2 more super chats and then we'll crack on. Charity Rivers with the £10 changed my YouTube name as I got personal threats on a video. BLM UK is trying to import social issues from the US. Makes no sense. Shocking amounts of people excusing these recent assaults on police officers. Oh, sorry to hear you got actual personal threats on videos. Like, I'll be honest, I've had some personal threats on my videos in the past with people who actually know my name, and like when I hadn't published what my name was at the time, and like that was quite scary. So I kind of know how you feel there. But yeah, that's awful.
I've had to take down my second to last stream because one of my guests was being threatened at work. So
yeah, I've had to take down a stream as well.
I'm thinking I'm gonna have to change my number. I got doxxed by somebody, so now all my number, address, everything. You can
good grief!
Yeah. So now every friggin' guy I meet just Googles my number, finds out who I am. It's horrible.
To be fair, Rose, it was a poor choice of judgment that to call yourself Rose of Dawn when your legal name is Rose Dawn. It seems very
one last super chat. Nico Boy Official with the $5. Heard about the furry fandom's Antifa problem.
Oh God, Tim Pool. How can you know? No, don't do it.
You just look for the fursuit covered in hammers and sickles. Hey,
look at the fursuit wearing a diaper.
The crinklers.
Dear.
Oh God.
The diaper furs. That's a whole other episode.
That's just, we don't talk about rainforest.
Anyway, shall we move on to Sadiq Khan's Cultural Revolution?
Yeah. Just before I do, I need to show the tweets that that Mark just sent me.
Cool.
So we can show off some art.
I so rarely get fan art. But this is of yours.
It
seems quite good.
That is actually really cool.
Ooh,
that is really cool. Honestly, I love that. I love things like that. Where
you're apparently a demonic princess of hell. How do you feel about that?
Is it Hera from
Hela?
Hela, yeah, Hela for Ragnarok. So yeah, that is awesome. I really want more memes like that. Like I would love it if I had like loads of memes. So at the end of every episode, we could just do like a meme review.
Bring on the memes.
I'd
make some. I made a couple during the last stream, but none of them were able to be shown because they were a bit too spicy.
Yes, they were a bit too spicy. Garfield one.
Funny
God.
though.
Right. Okay. So with that, let's move on to the full-on culture war proper that's going on now. Because in the last 24 hours, things in the UK have got ridiculously insane. Like I'm sure everyone has seen the statue that was torn down in Bristol. We've had Winston Churchill statue defaced twice. We've had the cenotaph graffitied, and someone tried to set a flag on fire. For those who don't know, the cenotaph is basically the most important war memorial in the UK. And people were like trying to set the flag on fire. And
can you answer me this question, please? What exactly are they protesting there? Because I don't think I've ever heard of like UK police killing all these people. Like,
here's the fun thing, which I want to bring up. So my university sent out an email to all of the students, and they were talking about the systemic racism in British police and society, and they brought up 3 particular cases. Okay,
did they bring up Mark Duggan, the armed drug dealer?
No, they brought up. Where's this now? I'm just scrolling back because they basically brought up nearly there, and yeah, okay, so they brought up Shiko Bayo, I'm probably mispronouncing that, Kingsley Burrell, Sarah Reed, and many others. I mean, Shiku Bio was taken into custody because she was high, and she OD'd in custody. That's a negligence case.
Right.
Kingsley Burrell is the latest, latest unclear death in police custody. That was 9 years ago.
Wow.
2011, and he was mentally challenged, and it seems like they didn't know how to deal with him, and unfortunately it resulted in his death. The chap who was responsible for that was sacked and disciplined and received some other legal trouble as well.
Right.
And then there's Sarah Reed, who was 8 years ago in 2012. She did not receive a psychological evaluation in time for kind of assisted custody, and she killed herself. She was suicide.
Yeah.
So that's an admin failure, again, negligence, none of which can be blamed on institutional racism. And those are the only 3 deaths in the last 10 years.
Yeah, that's something which really needs to be highlighted, because we're getting the narrative about, like, when they try and push a narrative of police brutality, and you point out that actually the numbers in the UK are really low. Like, I think it's like since from 1990, there's been like 1,100 deaths in police custody, which has been dropping. Like,
I know that in the last 10 years, there's been less than 100.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
A
always
lot
think
of
of the
them,
UK police as being like inefficient, if anything.
We don't kill enough of them.
Like they play the Benny Hill music with them.
If our police are institutionally racist, they're really bad at it.
Yeah, like our police are very efficient if you're going on a walk in the Lake District. Not so much if you've got a knife.
Yeah, or want to like blow shit up.
Although, I do remember one video recently of a lad, I think it was in Walthamstow, where the police were searching him, and there was a big crowd, and they were trying to say, like, oh, the police are overstepping the mark. Like, this, leave this poor man alone. And then one of the police officers just goes into the guy's bag and pulls out a massive knife and just really bluntly says, like, look, this is why we're searching him. Do you want us to let him go? And then people still squawked at him. Like, people really have their priorities with the police in this country in a completely.
If anything, I think the police has lost a lot of its credibility. That's part of its problem.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, they have. I mean, how many people really respect the police in this country? Like, I find them mostly disorganized. Like, I think during lockdown, they lost a hell of a lot of goodwill when they're driving vans through parks with massive loudspeakers telling people that they have to go in. There was that journalist who was recording a woman being arrested with her dog, and the police officer was barking at him, basically calling him a murderer for being out of the house at the time. Because that was the one which really horrified me of everything which they've done this year. I found that even worse than the officer who went up to someone and had a go at him because his kids were playing in the front garden.
The interesting thing with our police is there seems to be corruption, but only in particular areas. So this crisis in particular has certainly revealed a particular underclass of police who are really, really getting high off their own authority in this regard. There's also confusion because there are a lot of police officers who don't know how to apply the standard guidelines that the government has laid out. There's a real inconsistency there. And finally, there's also the issue that a lot of people, like trust in the police in particular areas, has been eroding over a long period of time. And this is mainly due to the English Holocaust, which has been happening. I'm sorry, the grooming gang scandal.
Oh, yeah.
Which I'm producing a documentary on, shameless plug. So it's a really a difficult situation. It's hard to gauge what the public support is because I feel like, particularly in the north, support is much lower than it is in the south.
Mm. Yep.
Sorry,
I can
Mike,
say
to bring that.
North here. I don't think you've got much of a word in edgeways here, Mike. How is policing where you are? I know I asked Blaire about that, but what are your experience with police, like your local area? Do you have much contact with the police at all?
Well, I have a good friend who is marrying a cop who's like the head cop in my neighborhood, so I think they're good. I mean, there are bad cops, of course, as we saw with George Floyd, but that's the thing. It's not most cops, and you can't be part of a minority, not want to be judged by a small segment of it, and then do the same thing to other people, which is exactly what's happening now. It's not most cops, and I'm all for having changes and more oversight, better procedures to ensure that this doesn't happen again. But I think it just should show everybody just how powerful the radical left is. That in 3 days, something can go from being an idea that nobody believes, that's only shared by the most radical of the radical left, and in 3 days' time, abolish the police is now being passed by cities. It's embraced by all your Facebook friends. People are going to have to apologize for not supporting it. It's insane the amount of power that they have over people.
Yeah, and it's a similar thing with the kind of culture war that's happened over here over the weekends. I mean, in the last 24 hours, we've had several, like, institutional TV shows. By that, I mean, like, you know, these are real tentpoles in British comedy that have now been effectively unpersoned by the BBC and Netflix and other streaming services. It started with a show called Little Britain. I wouldn't blame you, Mike, if you haven't heard of it. But
no, I have heard of it.
Oh, you have? Okay.
Yeah, I haven't seen it, but I've heard of it. It's actually kind of popular here, or it was years ago.
It's all right.
It's outdated.
Yeah, I mean, I rewatched all of it last year, thankfully, because I won't be able to now. But what I didn't like about it so much is that it is literally the same joke over and over again. Like, there is very little for a kind of variety-ish sketch show. That there's very little variety in it. Like, if you see a character, you know exactly what they're going to do in any situation because it's always the same joke. Like, some of it's really funny, but when you've kind of heard that same joke for like the 10th time, it kind of starts to grate.
Little Britain is, I didn't like it at the time, but it was massively, you can't understate how massively popular Little Britain was.
Yes, it was. When it was out, it was the biggest comedy in the UK. Like, far and away. Like,
so wait, what happened though?
So Little Britain has now been completely removed from all streaming sites.
Why?
In the UK. The reason for that is because of a character who I don't think actually appears until the 3rd season, which is played by David Williams, who is a morbidly obese black woman. And the joke of it isn't so much like kind of doing blackface, but it's more just as a counter to another character who is also a morbidly obese woman, and they both get naked and think of themselves as being very, very attractive when they're not. Although there is an episode in the 1st season, it's just a one-off sketch where both Matt Lucas and David Williams are dressed up as minstrels. And they're just having their breakfast, and it just appears on the radio as someone talking about how offensive minstrels are, and then they look really upset. They turn the radio channel, and then all of a sudden has this like really kind of stereotypical minstrel song, and then they start kind of dancing along to it. But I don't think that's probably what has weighed into them being cancelled. But also Come Fly With Me, which is a similar show, which I actually think is a better show than Little Britain. Like, I absolutely love Come Fly With Me.
It was better. It wasn't really my cup of tea, but I thought it was funny.
I love Come Fly With Me. It's criminal that it only lasted 1 season.
I don't know that one.
I think
I want to make a film like Alien versus Predator.
Like, it never really took off.
Love Britain versus Come Fly With Me.
like a couple of the characters. There was one. I can't remember what I think it's like Precious or something her name was, or something like that. Who Matt Lucas dressing up as like a black lady. Who, like, her thing was always like she ran a little coffee stall, and in every episode there would be a reason as to why she couldn't open the coffee stall, or she would just make up a reason and then just use the change to go gambling or something. But like,
it's the devil's work.
Yeah. It's so funny. It's so stupid. But like, that's been banned. Another show is League of Gentlemen, which is really, really weird.
Are there going to be any shows left after this?
Well, this is.
I really like the League of Gentlemen. League of Gentlemen was really funny. That's where Little Britain nicked a lot of its stuff from.
Yeah, when I was younger, I didn't get the League of Gentlemen. And so I found it really, really strange. But recently, after I really got into Inside Number 9, I started watching it. And yeah, I find it brilliant.
Really like League of Gentlemen. League of Gentlemen is a surreal comedy. They have a character. the point of the show is that the characters are quite ridiculous. One of the characters is a Nazi pedophile, and they're meant to be like the most terrible people who could have ever lived.
Yeah,
and it's really weird. It's very surreal, but I think it's very funny. And to remove the League of Gentlemen is completely missing the point of the League of Gentlemen.
Yeah, and
even more so than something like Little Britain.
Yeah, and the League of Gentlemen is the one that really concerns me because it's been removed because of Papa Lazarou, who is kind of like a clown, but he looks like a minstrel. But the thing is, it isn't supposed to be somebody in blackface. The whole thing behind Papa Lazarou is just meant to look like a really kind of creepy clown. It isn't supposed to be a parody of
real comedy. That's the point. It is. It's surreal. It's meant to be odd and strange, and it's
Papa Lazarou is one of the most iconic characters from the show.
And they were fine with all this shit a week ago.
Yes, literally a week ago. If you told anyone a week ago that League of Gentlemen would basically disappear, nobody would believe you. In fact, I think people are still probably finding it difficult to believe now. But then there's also Bo Selector.
Keith Lemon apologized for Bo Selector.
Keith Lemon apologized for Bo Selector.
Yeah,
Keith Lemon was parodying specific people, in particular Craig David and his pet falcon.
Craig David was the best character. It's the only reason I like Craig David.
The only characters which are great were Craig David and Michael Jackson, where he does like the Michael Jackson Cribs episode, and he's like, "Now you know where I live. You better not come try to rob me." Crazy Ozzy Osbourne lives next door. Crazy spoon-loving mother. Anyway, the
okay, I definitely gotta watch this.
Bo Selector is so childish.
It's parodying.
It's weird,
specific individuals. It is not about their race. It is not about mocking black people.
That doesn't matter to
well,
these people.
Craig David in Bo Selector is basically just like a kind of a northerner who has a pet falcon. There's
it's called Kes.
Yeah, he's got Kes.
And occasionally spunks up the sheets in a posh hotel.
Yeah, he's like, one of his running jokes is that he keeps on pissing himself. Like it's just really like Bo Selector is an incredibly stupid show. And
It's like spitting image crop with Trigger Happy TV.
It's smart at its best.
Oh, another great character in it is Mel B. It's like literally all the best characters in it were like actual black people. Like Mel B was awesome in the first season when she keeps on trying to plug her book. Like when she does this whole kind of like a week with Mel B. And then she just goes on the beach with a detector and digs up.
Michael being very lost there, but the point is a lot of these were iconic British comedies at the time. They're very popular at the time, and a lot of the stuff is more to do with surreal comedy than it is to do with mocking black people, or it's to do with mocking specific celebrities.
And the only caricature show which seems to have escaped is the Ali G show. And the only reason that's escaped is because people have pointed out that it's mocking white people pretending to be black people.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean,
I'm just waiting for them to realize that the Mighty Boosh has some blackface in it.
Yeah, I was thinking of that because the Spirit of Jazz.
Everyone's forgotten. Well, there's also like Rudy. They do like the whole Carlos Santana thing where they go to find the new sound. And
oh God, yes. Oh God, I keep on forgetting about that.
Well, the thing is, I think the Mighty Boosh has become so obscure that it's avoided the fate of Little Britain.
Oh no! Like
I can see the poor confusion on Mike Harlow's face, where he's just like
trying to catch
up. What the fuck are these British people talking about?
Selector, what the fuck is that?
No, but I mean, I think it goes to show how scary this shit is. I don't know. I was talking to Brendan last night. And
sorry, I was wrong. They pulled the Mighty Boosh. They pulled it.
I don't know what that means.
What? They pulled the Mighty Boosh and
they got rid of that.
They pulled them both.
No, they pulled the Mighty Boosh.
They pulled the Mighty Boosh.
Well, I'm glad I have it all on mini disc. That's all I can say.
Oh my God, they have. Oh my God.
Are there anything? Is there anything left?
Oh my God.
I don't think so.
I knew that was going to be next. Yep.
Oh,
Netflix pulls the Mighty Boosh and the League of Gentlemen over blackface. Critics calling the move an arbitrary gesture that does little to combat racism. Well, yeah, it is.
Duh.
It doesn't do little.
There we go. Yep, called it. The Spirit of Jazz.
It doesn't do little. It does nothing to curb racism, because nobody watching that show was thinking, "Ha ha, black people." I'm sorry, just none of them were.
Like, I just love their description of like the problematic Papa Lazarus, a blacked up ringmaster who calls everyone Dave. It's true.
No, Dave.
The spirit of jazz is supposed to be the ghost of fictional jazz musician Howlin' Jimmy Jefferson, as played by But yeah, like, oh my god. Like,
but that's part of the comedy as well. It's just like the nonsensicalness of like seeing Howard Moon pretend to be a jazz musician. Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's it. Like both the League of Gentlemen and the Mighty Boosh are very, very surreal. Like the Mighty Boosh even more so.
Yeah.
Like, and so this was never going to stop at Little Britain. Like Bo Selector, it has aged terribly. Like it is really aged terribly. But like the League of Gentlemen and the Mighty Boosh, like I'm now trying to think of what's going to be next. Like, of course, like this.
I don't know. I think they're just going to mandate that everybody watches The Handmaid's Tale. To be honest.
But then, like, you know, America isn't free from it either, because there's a TV show called Cops.
Oh,
they're getting rid of Cops?
They've got rid of Cops.
What is Cops?
No, I didn't know that. Oh god, if you've ever seen any stuff that's like the worst, like trashiest, most American trash thing ever, it is Cops.
Really? Worse than New Girl?
Worse than what?
Worse than New Girl?
Oh, you got no idea. No, this is like what people in trailer parks watch.
Really?
It's just like it follows like cops arresting people for like drunk and disorderly conduct or something, and they're all drunk, and sometimes they're naked, and like
I'm white trash and I'm in trouble.
It must have been on like 30, 40 years.
Yeah.
Like, really?
I think this one is like 30 seconds.
That's been caused to cancel all police shows, like all police procedurals and all police-related shows completely.
That is bad.
That's crazy. I didn't know that.
Really bad. Like,
no, there was this girl who was fired from some other TV show because she wasn't supportive enough of Black Lives Matter. She supports Black Lives Matter. She just was not supportive enough.
Do you remember her name? Do you remember her name?
We've had exactly the same. Sorry, just before you go, Rose. Yeah. We've had almost exactly the same thing here, which is where the University of Liverpool has a hall called William Gladstone Hall. William Gladstone is a former British Prime Minister. He was vehemently anti-slavery. That university is renaming that hall because William Gladstone's father owned slaves.
Gladstone is one of our greatest prime ministers.
Yes. I think part of it wasn't also to do with like, he was like that reparations were paid wrong. Like they should have been paid to the slaves rather than the people who own slaves. Like completely ignoring the context of what was happened, as though we know from today can state what happened 200 years ago.
We know full well, as you'll know, Rose, because you were on the stream the other night, exactly what the alternative was. There were two options. There was pay off the slave owners, or there was civil war. The Americans did the Civil War route. We did the pay off the slave owners route. Which was the more harmonious in the long run appears to have been our way of doing it. As horrendous as it was the quickest and dirtiest way of getting the deal done. And then we spent 200 years abolishing the fucking slave trade. What do you expect?
Yeah, like I find that criticism completely bizarre. Like it's still an effort to end it. I'm sorry if you're offended by the fact these people were paid off, but what would you have rather the slaves had not been bought their freedom? Like would you have rather that? Because like you said, the alternative would be all-out civil war, and we know how devastating that was to the United States. They effectively had to start back from scratch. I mean, like was it like 600,000 people died in a civil war, and the United States wasn't at the size that it is now. And then the British Empire at the time was a lot larger. Yeah. So if the Civil War was that deadly to the States, think about it. That would have effectively been the First World War. Because the British Empire, the sun never sat on the British Empire.
It never will.
So you would have a whole world at war, basically because of Britain trying to stop slavery.
But that doesn't matter to them. That's more thought than they've put into it. It's just about control and power and compliance. They will make you comply.
Well, it is. All of this is about control, and it's about. Yeah. And this is, earlier I posted a kind of thread on my Facebook. So Konstantin Kisin did a tweet thread about kind of like his prediction of what could happen going forward.
Oh, good grief. Yeah, he basically has taken a story from 1920s Germany and applied it to a modern context. Yeah,
but like bits of it certainly kind of some bits of it feel like they can kind of ring true. And the bits that, in particular that I would focus on is the idea that the people in the country would see the police acting more favorably to the activists who were kind of like doing vandalism on, like Sir Churchill and the cenotaph, where I don't think anyone really understands how pissed off the country is about that. Because you're insulting the country's greatest hero, and you're insulting the country's greatest war memorial. And if there's one thing that can be said about British culture, it's respect for the military. And so you have both of these things happening without punishment.
Certainly in the working classes who still use the military as a social laddering system.
Yes.
And the especially in military circles, notably particularly regulars as opposed to officers who are a bit more split, I have certainly noticed that no one is supporting this action.
No, everyone's there. I mean, I've talked to my parents, they're livid. I've talked to people who are normally kind of a bit more like kind of socially like neither here nor there, and even they are like, this is all going too far. The only people who are supporting this are, like, at least from what I've seen, are the radical leftists that I'm friends with, because of course they would, like, they think,
and also like the corporations and stuff, because like look what's happening around you in your country. Like they let them.
I cannot go anywhere without seeing something about this online in particular.
Yeah,
it's not so much of a problem. In my local area, it's basically a non-issue. But in online, if I open my Spotify playlist, it's like, would you rather listen to Black Lives Matter? If I open YouTube, it's got like little captions under every video. And of course, all the political commentators are going off on this. If I open Twitter, it's all anyone's talking about. If I open Facebook or Instagram, it's all anyone's posting about. It's infuriating. It's everywhere. Sony have started doing it. Steam have put out, I think Steam put out a message, or they didn't put out a message, and that pissed people off. And even like food companies, I used to buy Yorkshire tea, now I can't buy Yorkshire tea because they've decided to get political and all this other stuff. It's nonsense. It's really infuriating.
Yeah, but it seems like some of them are kind of doing it just to save face.
I have no doubt. Like most of them have no idea about any of the issues. As you know, and those who should know about the issues and who should know better are also putting out very low resolution statements. And it's also one of the reasons why I got in a discussion on Twitter, a very civil discussion. I wouldn't even call it an argument, with someone who was talking to me about how, people quoting Orwell about, the defacement and removal of monuments are out of line, right? Because Orwell was a socialist, and his the primary message of 1984 was that only the power is in the proles, and that's what's happening. The proles are rising up against the party, and I'm like, nobody has condemned this in the mainstream politics. All of the businesses are on your side. All of the politicians have capitulated, and people are like demanding that police take a knee, and a lot of them are. It's not that if you're pushing on an open door, you are not a radical. I am sorry.
I find it strange.
It's never an open door. There's no walls anymore.
Sorry, let Mike talk, because he's just.
Oh, sorry. I was just saying, here there's nobody pushing against it. Like, we have the Republicans who are supposed to be the opposition party of this. They are like crickets chirping. They are so useless and weak that nobody will stand up against this. And I feel like there's something, I don't know, there's something really scary about the events of this year total, between the lockdowns and this shit. There's something about it that just feels permanent. I don't see how there's any coming back from this when you have every corporation, every celebrity, everything supporting this.
But then they never really, that was never going to save them. Like, there will always be a way of cancelling things.
In there,
appease the mob and basically kind of, making confession pieces, because that's what a lot of, I think like Bethesda's, like they did a load of posts today on Twitter, which was basically reading like a confession piece, the kind of thing that you would see in a cultural revolution, just being like, please, we acknowledge our sins, please have mercy. The red card will beat them to shit regardless, because they're the wrong class.
The way they see it is that in their mind, it costs them nothing to capitulate to these people, because most people are apathetic. Yeah. And if this all blows over, then they lose nothing, because most people will continue buying their products. And if it does go beyond this, then they've shown loyalty to the party line. It doesn't matter that in reality these activists would never stand for that, because no purity test is truly pure enough. But that's the way that they look at it, and it's infuriating to see.
I want to put a question to everyone, if that's all right. Would you consider progressivism to be one of the greatest evils in the planet right now?
I don't know. The thing is, progressivism, it's gone beyond progressivism now. I think we're at like full cultural revolutionism now, isn't it?
Yes, but this is the thing. It's become this, and it was always going to become this.
It is, in my mind, it is not one of the most evil, because it does not have the power in the sense that it is not the government. There is some resistance, and most regular people are not on board.
Where's the resistance?
Right. Yeah, it's basically just us and like
the resistance is that they are not the actual echelons of power, and they don't just pass a law instead of protesting. They're not just pass a law and abolish the police flat like that. Now, regardless of anything else, they are delayed by lengthy bureaucratic processes that force them to go through the letter of the law at the moment, and they aren't in a position to change it in any meaning and lasting way at the moment. Whether or not they will get there is a scary thought. I think at that point they will become evil. But in terms of like the amount of evil that they spread at the moment, I think they have a high potential to be the most evil, one of the most evil things that has happened on this earth.
Yes.
But I think that it's hard to equate that to, say, what's going on in like North Korea, the Middle East, the genocide of the Uyghurs in China, and other stuff like that. I just think it's hard to equate that.
I think this is the beginning of what gets us there, and it's not progressivism; it's authoritarian leftism. Because this is the road to just full communism. If you can't have a different opinion, if you can't speak without losing your job, without getting censored and banned, then is that really freedom? And when you have every powerful entity, from the corporations to academia, the media, soon to be the government probably, all pushing the same ideology,
I agree.
That's not freedom.
I certainly agree with you on that regard. I think it will be very interesting to see how projects such as the Free Speech Union fare in this new environment. I think if that can be crushed, then we truly will have fallen, and yes, we will be in the end times then. To bring in religious terminology, I don't know what we could do at that point beyond civil disobedience, beyond and above the pale.
I mean, one of my biggest concerns with the way that progressivism is going is that it is very similar to the likes of communism, where it claims to speak on behalf of the oppressed classes. Just with progressivism, rather than talking about the working class, the landlords, and the way in which a lot of Marxism is framed is in classes. But a lot of progressivism is based more. It makes classes out of immutable characteristics. So that's where you get races are seen as classes, genders are seen as classes. Sex is or isn't, depending on whether or not you're a radical feminist or a trans activist, but that's beside the point. And so they use that as a way of being able to speak on behalf of everyone that they say is in that group. And I know that Mike will have definitely encountered this. Me and Blaire certainly have, where they claim to speak on behalf of us. And we're seeing this a lot with Black Lives Matter, where they claim to speak on behalf of Black people. I mean, it all goes back to that Joe Biden quote from the other week about, if you don't vote, if you've got to decide whether to vote for me or the other guy, you're not Black.
And I think it wasn't reported on what was even more disgusting about that, because when he said that, it was in response to the other guy simply saying, we have some questions for you. So it's like, no, you're Black. You're not allowed to have questions. You do as you're told.
Yeah.
It's so sick. And another thing, too, is that I don't know if you guys saw Black Lives Matter came out with their list of demands.
Yes.
None of them have anything to do with policing. It's like ban fossil fuels, single-payer health care, ban books, take textbooks out of schools and replace them with ones written by far-left authors.
Yeah, well, they always do. All of these causes, they will always push it in the name of a minority group.
Yep. So now, if you don't
don't
want to ban books, if you don't want to ban fossil fuels, if you don't want single-payer healthcare, you're just a racist.
Yeah, it's all about the strings.
I always bring this back to the trans activists, because when I talk about trans activists, what I'm really talking about is identity politics. I just focus on the trans activist angle because that's the one I am most familiar with. But all of them act in the same way. They get a group of people who they claim to represent, and then they push radical agendas, a lot of which have little to do with that community which they're claiming to represent. And they use that community and they use that identity to try and force a kind of worldview on so many different people. And they claim that if you oppose this, then you are racist. If you oppose this, then you're sexist. And have a look at any identity politics group. I don't care whether it's something like Black Lives Matter, whether it's radical feminism, whether it's trans rights activists, whether it's anything to do with religion. Look at it. They all operate in the same way. Every single one.
On that note, unfortunately, I am going to have to bow out for this evening, but which is a shame. But my recommendation to anyone is go in solidarity and watch Blazing Saddles.
Oh God, that's
masterpiece.
Yes.
I watched the producers
in honor of Count Dankula.
Yeah. But thank you very much for having me on, Rose.
Thank you for coming on.
If anyone else is interested in news coverage, the grooming gang scandal in the UK and other stuff, feel free to subscribe to me. Otherwise, don't worry about it. And
always not so obvious. Good boy.
Not so obvious. Just same as mine.
There's a link to the channel in the description.
Yes,
it's the same for Mike's, Blaire's, and also a link to Short Fat Otaku's for dumping risk.
You should link to my new Twitter account as well, considering it's going to be gone in another week.
Yeah, but next week.
Trust me, yeah. It will be.
Take care, everybody. Have a great stream.
Bye, dude.
On, Mark. Bye. So we'll probably start wrapping things up fairly soon. Does anyone have anything else that they want to add before we
I just quickly wanted to add. I just want to do a little section here. I got my own little section.
Of course.
Here about good news.
Yes.
There's good news.
This week I would like to talk about the NASA partnering with SpaceX in their mission to the International Space Station. This is a story from last week, but it's extremely encouraging. There are finally two nations once again putting objects in space. We have the Russians, who are still launching their Soyuz rockets, and now we have the first joint manned mission between NASA and SpaceX. And it can't be overstated what a big milestone this is. This is one of the first signs that the private sector and the government's organizations can work together to put a successful mission. It has drastically reduced the cost of putting things into space from US soil. It means that the US is no longer reliant on Russia to put objects in space. And it's also a leap forward in rocket technology. We had a rocket launch in a partnership between a private company and a government agency. The rocket launched, it deposited the astronauts on the ISS, and then they launched the rocket's first stage, landed back on their drone ship successfy. It was a marvelous kind of milestone in terms of commercialized and not commercialized, in terms of the private sector putting stuff into space. It's no longer simply the purview of NASA, and it's part of a whole new chapter of space exploration for America. Trump was there to watch it live.
I love that picture.
It was a rousing success.
Like,
yes.
I'm actually fascinated with space travel. Like, whenever I've been to Florida, I always make sure to go to the Kennedy Space Center, because when you see these rockets,
When are you in Florida?
well, I was supposed to be in Florida in September, but obviously that's not happening now. But me and my boyfriend are planning on going to Florida sometime.
Come to New York too.
There's so many places that we need to go to in America. Like,
Yes.
like Blaire wanting to meet up, Ariel wants to meet
I
up,
have the same problem.
London wants to meet up. Like, the thing is, I want to see everyone. I think that I might have to do like a massive America road trip and basically go around and see everyone. I will probably hold.
I need to do the same thing. Yeah.
Well,
yes, do it.
Me and Scrump do like a. That's
I did that back in 2016. I visited like 6 different cities. I spent like a month and a half in America. It was pretty great.
But the thing is,
but there still wasn't enough.
I'm going to have to split it between seeing people and doing theme parks, because I have to. There's so much that I need to do. I mean, I've done every single Disney park in the world apart from Walt Disney World and Disneyland in California. But I've done, which, they're the 2 that everyone's done. But I've done like Shanghai and Tokyo and Hong Kong. So I need to go and do those. But going back to the Kennedy Space Center, when you see all this kind of stuff up close, when you actually see how huge it is, like, it is some of the most amazing stuff that humans have ever created. And I've always been kind of disappointed at the lack of kind of enthusiasm towards space travel. I mean, like, especially since they discontinued the shuttle launches and everything just kind of went quiet. Like, I don't want this to sound like I'm going on a Film Robert rant about how we should be living on Mars by now. But I do think that we should be living on the moon. I really want.
Yeah, which the big thing is there was a loss of prestige during the Obama administration, in that a lot of what Americans thought made them American was kind of suspended for a while. Yeah. And despite all what's been going on, it's a huge milestone in space travel, and it's a real sign that things are moving back in the right direction again after 8 years of essential darkness in terms of America's ambitions in space. Yeah. I think it's very important that as humanity that we are able to look to bigger things than us. It's important that we're able to have these long-term, wide-reaching goals, that we're not just focused on this minutia of all the shit that's going on here in our daily lives and within the politics and identity politics. That there are these larger things that we can be moving towards. It's encouraging. It's kind of like it's the ray of hope in the cloudy sky. And I'm very glad it happened. It was nice watching it live. The head of NASA got quite emotional, which was it's kind of funny to see. But again, it's not everything is bad, and things. Yeah. Again, I'll be bringing my little rays of sunshine to the stream, because the news recently has been so overwhelmingly negative. But we're back in space, guys. The West is back in space.
No, we do need to focus a lot more on the positives, because whenever you look at the news nowadays, it is something which gets people angry, and I certainly fall into that trap. I fall into it all the time, but there is positives that are going on, and
it's hard to find them.
It is. It's really hard, but in order to save our sanity, we kind of have to. Like the positive news which I've picked out for this week. I mean, like, this is pretty much Scrump's segment, but I still want to share something which is quite close to my heart. So Chester Zoo is a zoo which is very near to where I grew up. It was a place where I spent a lot of my childhood there. Because of lockdown, there are no seals. Unfortunately, there are no seals. They have rhinos, they have lions, they have jaguars. Like, they have chimps. It's amazing. Like, the only zoo I've ever been to which is better is probably San Diego. But otherwise, it is like a world-class zoo. But anyway, thanks to lockdown, they've been losing a lot of money because they've got to look after the animals. That causes a lot of money. And initially, they weren't sure when they'd be able to reopen. So last week, they made an announcement. They were in very dire straits. They needed to raise money in order to feed the animals. I donated some money, as did quite a lot of people. And I think they raised like around £2 million, which is a lot of money to go to the animals. And thankfully, the government has announced that from Monday, zoos in the UK can open. So Chester Zoo is officially saved, which I think is really important. Okay. I think it's really important because I am a huge advocate of good zoos. Like, I've been to some terrible zoos, but a zoo that kind of puts education and conservation first and foremost, I think, is a powerful tool. And it really made my day when Chester Zoo was like able to reopen. Although I would love to
those zoos that aren't like that bitch Carol Baskin.
Oh God! Like, I mean, like the worst zoo I've been to is either the one at Drayton Manor in the UK or Beijing Zoo.
Mm.
And Beijing Zoo had some amazing animals, but like for example, the pandas, everyone was just screaming at the like all the little kids were just screaming at the pandas. They did nothing about it, which was disgusting. But they had good animals. The enclosures were as shit as you would expect for China. So anyway, Chester Zoo is a lot better than Beijing Zoo. So don't go to Beijing. If you're ever in Beijing, don't bother going to the zoo. I've done that journey for you. It's not great. Okay, so with that, I think, has everyone gone into into the description and voted on who they think has the seal of approval for this week? If you haven't already done so, go into the description, click the straw poll link, and vote. I'll give you 1 minute.
I will say, in the meantime, you've not really had much time here, Mike. I'm sorry about that. Mm-hmm. We've kind of been shuffling between British topics here, but is there anything you'd like to present, you'd like to say, or you'd like to before we?
Yeah, I kind of, so this was sort of in the news lately with Trump's executive order. I don't know if you guys heard much about that on Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act in terms of Twitter and social media censoring people. So I actually just got permanently banned from Twitter. No reason given. They said they don't need to give me a reason.
They never do.
No, this is I was permanently banned for no reason last year, and I fought them for 6 months, and I got it back, and now I'm permanently banned again. So this is really, I feel like people don't realize what a massive issue this is, and I think there are so many people that are just like, whenever somebody gets banned, they're like, "Ooh, okay, let's be quiet about it, and maybe we'll be the last ones to get banned." So I feel like we really got to start like all not allowing this to happen or really pushing back against them. So it's insane how they just keep censoring people. And I think between now and the election here in November, you're going to see people getting banned that you would have never expected.
Yeah.
Well, it has a Streisand effect too. You can learn to. The thing is, they play whack-a-mole, but their systems aren't exactly the best for keeping people off the platform, as I will attest. I basically made a career of being banned from Twitter. It's one of the things that. Yeah, it's one of the things that initially got me noticed and got me popular was the amount of times I've been banned from Twitter and the amount of times I've come back. I'm on my 10th account.
I need advice. You gotta help me out.
Yeah. Like Scrump can tell you what to do.
Oh, tell me.
It's as simple as a lot of bans are arbitrary. There is no way to stay on the platform. If people are mass reporting you, you will always go because most of it's automatic, and the appeal system is broken. It's just a case of create a new account, create as much noise as you can, get people who know you and with larger platforms to re-promote you, and you can use it as a springboard to come back bigger. Because I think almost every time when I've been allowed to be on the platform for long enough, I've actually come back bigger on the platform. So it's a case of just come back, and make a noise and be defiant. Because fighting them over the account, I found just doesn't work. I've tried it myself. Really? And you're right. All they'll do is they'll argue. They might admit it at one point, and then they'll find some new excuse to suspend you again. And then it's another 6 months of arguing with them. Twitter can't keep people off the platform. So it's just keep coming back and make a show of coming back. That's what I did. And it worked out pretty well for me.
So with that, let's have a look and see if I can reveal who gets the seal of approval this week. Drum roll. That's the wrong link. That's my spreadsheet looking at the seal of approvals. Where the hell has it gone? There we go.
Do we have a seal of the week this week, though?
We do. in just a moment. But the seal of approval this week goes to Scrump.
Yes,
Scrump,
yes,
you
I
won
win.
the seal of approval.
I finally won. I say finally. It's only episode 2.
So Scrump wins with 10 votes. Not So Obvious comes in second with 7, followed closely by Blaire, and then me, and
no,
Mike. But Mike, you did win halfway.
I was there like 2 seconds, so I
did,
my,
yeah,
my
I mean,
ego is
we'll have you
bullet.
on properly sometime. We promise.
Yeah.
That's
So
okay, my ego is bulletproof.
let me see if I can find you the video, the seal of the week. Just bear with me.
This is the most important part of the stream.
This is the most important part of the stream. Let me see if where is the thing. This is going to take me a moment because I thought I had it up, but I didn't. Right. Okay. Let me.
You guys gotta come on my channel soon.
Oh yeah, will do. Absolutely. Right. Okay. Yeah, it's going to show my name. Fuck it. I don't care anymore. Okay. So the seal of the week is this seal.
Oh,
So
in the grass.
Yes. So this is a seal who is in the. Let me make sure play that again. Like the seal is frolicking in the grass. And so the seal's name is Echinacea or Echinacea. I don't know how you pronounce it. But
where is this?
There he is. This seal is in Ireland at a place called Seal Rescue Island. And as you can see, bouncing around, frolicking in the grass.
That's very sweet.
Wait, what is it with you and seals?
Okay, so seals, I find absolutely adorable. I mean, they're basically dogs that live in the sea. Initially, I just absolutely fell in love with baby harp seals. They're the ones that are the really fluffy white seals. But then I came to appreciate lots of different kinds of seals, and they have a lot of personality. Like, they are basically dogs that live in the sea. And they're really friendly. They're really cute. They're awesome.
I didn't know if there was like history behind it or something other than just like you like seals.
No, there's just seals.
Seals are just cute.
Right,
I texted Blaire that day that she was like that she went off social media and was like feeling should I send her the seal that you intended for her. I was like, Rose sends you seals.
Good. Everyone should have a seal. Right, so with that, we've got a few more super chats to read out. Les Siegel says, not so obvious, Telford care lever here. Having grown up amongst it, any latest into Ellie Williams, etc. would be appreciated. Thanks for covering it. Sorry, that Mark ain't here anymore, but yeah, sure, you can pass that on to him. Aaron Hook with the 499. Gladstone was not our greatest PM. That was Disraeli. Gladstone did initially defend slavery, but then became an opponent of it. I mean, I would have said Lord Palmerston.
I didn't say he was the greatest. I said one of our greatest. Yeah, Gladstone, Palmerston, and Disraeli are like that era of defining what Britain became. But anyway, that's a different topic. Sorry.
It just kind of reminds me of the Simpsons, like Barney arguing with
Lord Palmerston.
And Makuna Pterodax with the £10. I've worked out that non-students 18 to 24-year-olds voted 40% Labour and 34% Conservative in December 2019. Students 18 to 24-year-olds, however, voted 72% Labour and 8% Conservative. Well, that's because students get very easily radicalised into the left. Like it's is like a trend. But yeah, at least it kind of shows that, you know, as people mature, they gain a more reasonable world position. No shade to any leftists in my audience, but you'd be saying the same thing about the right. I've been around enough left-wing people to know it goes both ways. So with that, is there any other shout-outs that you guys would like to do?
If anyone watching has Twitter, right, hashtag free Mike Harlow.
Okay, and Scrump, is there a dumping with Scrump heading our way?
There isn't one recorded right now. The latest one we've got, go and check out, we did with Sophia Norwitz, because we went through in more detail, and we have a lot of her footage there, which is incredible as well. So if you want to check that out, go and check out the latest Stump with Scrump on the Short Fat Attacker channel. Also, if you want to refollow me on Twitter, I don't know how long I can promise it'll be about, but I'm at Royal Scrump right now. This is my 10th account. But you know the drill. You know the drill. Get it while it's hot. Get it while it's there. That's all I really have to share. Anyway.
Okay, awesome. So with that, I am working on more content. I've just had quite a difficult time over the last couple of weeks due to lockdown. It's really kind of killed a lot of my energy in making videos. That's why there's been a lull. I've got so many ideas and things that I've been working on, but right now I am trying to focus on kind of dealing with the anxiety as a result of lockdown. And thing is, I'm planning on moving out of London, hopefully within the next month, fingers crossed. When I kind of get a fresh start, there will be a lot more stuff.
Wise choice.
But there's going to be seal of approval every week. There's going to be another seal of approval next Wednesday. I do have some more videos coming out. Some of them depend on events that I can't exactly talk about here, but there's some interesting thing going on in the background. Whether or not I can tell you about it remains to be seen. But anyway, thank you everyone for coming and tuning in. Thanks to Mike and Scrump as always. One last thing to add: if you guys want to create a thumbnail for any of the streams, tweet it to me, kind of like a meme to use as the stream.
Sure.
If anyone, because I'm always kind of struggle with making thumbnails for streams, so it might kind of start a thing where you can just put hashtag seal of approval, and the best meme becomes the thumbnail of the week. So any of you who want to do that, please do so. Otherwise, I will see you. Me and Scrump will see you next week. Mike, I hope you'll be back soon.
Yes, I would love to. So good to see you, Rose.
It's good to see
you.
Bye.
Bye.
In the